On July 15, 2013, a piano student knocked on the door of a Hartford, Wisconsin home at exactly 12:30 p.m. No one answered. Inside, a mother was about to discover that the small town's 30-year streak without a homicide had just ended in the worst possible way. This documentary is presented for educational and informational purposes only. All analysis is based on publicly available records, court documents, and reporting. No claims are made beyond established legal findings. Interpretations discussed are analytical observations, not accusations. Daniel Bartelt had a problem that summer. A problem he was hiding from everyone who knew him. The 19-year-old had dropped out of college after just one semester. His parents noticed the change immediately. Their once outgoing, jokey son had returned home subdued and depressed. But Daniel was also hiding something else. He had lost his job and was pretending every morning that he still had one. He would leave the house on schedule, drive his parents' minivan around town, and return at the expected time. This pattern of deception created a dangerous amount of unstructured time. Hours each day with no accountability. No coworkers to notice his absence. No schedule to document his whereabouts. Employment records would later become critical to the investigation. When Daniel first spoke to police, he claimed injuries on his hands came from a work shift. But payroll records told a different story. He had been terminated weeks earlier. This employment gap matters in criminal investigations for several reasons. First, it eliminates alibis that workplace documentation would normally provide. Second, it creates opportunity during hours when most people are accounted for. Third, it establishes a pattern of sustained deception directed at those closest to the suspect. Daniel's parents had no idea their son was driving aimlessly each day instead of working. They had no idea he was visiting parks during morning hours when most young people his age were in class or at jobs. And they certainly had no idea what he was planning. The question investigators would eventually ask was simple. What was Daniel Bartelt doing with all that unaccounted time? Jessie Blodgett was exhausted on the night of July 14, 2013. The 19-year-old University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee theater student had just finished opening weekend of Fiddler on the Roof. Every seat had been filled. The performance had gone beautifully. The cast celebrated with a pool party that evening. Photos from the event show Jessie smiling near a llama pen. She appeared happy. But when she returned home alone around 1 a.m., her mother Joy noticed something was wrong. Jessie seemed upset. She didn't want to talk much, but she told her mother about two older male cast members in their 40s who had made her uncomfortable. One had tried to pull her onto his lap. Jessie told her mother she didn't understand why men always had to make passes at her. What Jessie did next would become crucial evidence. She wrote in her diary before bed. The entry reveals someone processing unwanted attention and trying to establish boundaries. She wrote about platonic love being perverted into competition. She wrote about recognizing problems and confronting them without fear. Then she closed the diary and went to sleep. That diary entry is the last documented evidence of Jessie Blodgett alive and making her own choices. By morning, those choices would be taken from her forever. Her mother Joy left for work around 8 a.m. the next morning. She had quietly entered Jessie's room earlier to put away clothes and saw her daughter sleeping peacefully. Jessie had worked so hard that summer, teaching nearly 30 piano and violin students while performing in the musical. Joy decided to let her sleep in. If this investigation is revealing details you haven't heard before, consider subscribing to Silent Evidence. We examine cases where the forensic details tell stories that words alone cannot. Joy Blodgett returned home just after noon on July 15. The house was silent. Jessie's 12:30 p.m. piano student was knocking at the door. Joy called for her daughter. No response. She went upstairs to Jessie's bedroom. Her daughter was completely still. Joy said her name again. Nothing. Something felt wrong. Jessie's normally messy bed was perfectly clean. The blanket was wrapped around her neatly, too neatly. Joy walked around to the other side of the bed and tried to gently move her daughter. That's when she realized Jessie was blue. She was cold. Her clothes and hair were soaking wet, hours after she should have woken up. Joy's 911 call captured the moment she understood. Ligature marks circled her daughter's neck. Deep abrasions marked her wrists and ankles, indicating she had been restrained. Jessie had been strangled to death, then carefully positioned to look like she was sleeping peacefully. The staging is significant from an investigative standpoint. Someone had spent considerable time washing the body and arranging the scene. This behavior suggests several things. First, the perpetrator felt comfortable enough to remain at the scene for an extended period. Second, they had knowledge of the family's schedule and knew when they could work undisturbed. Third, the staging indicates a psychological need to minimize the visible violence of what had occurred. Crime scene investigators found a roll of tape under Jessie's bed. The tape matched the marks on her body. The tape had not belonged to the Blodgett household. Someone had brought it with them. There were no signs of forced entry. No damaged doors or windows. No indication of a break-in whatsoever. The medical examiner would later determine the time of death was approximately 9 a.m. Both of Jessie's parents had already left for work by then. Someone knew the family's routine. Someone knew Jessie would be alone and asleep at that exact time. Hartford, Wisconsin was a town that had seen only 2 murders in the previous 100 years. Jessie became the third. Despite this, police made an unusual statement. They told the public there was no ongoing threat to the community. This phrasing often indicates investigators believe the crime was targeted rather than random. While Hartford police processed Jessie's murder scene, investigators in nearby Richfield were working a different case. Days before Jessie's death, a woman named Melissa had been attacked in a park while walking her dog. A man had approached from behind holding a knife. Melissa grabbed the blade and fought him off. She needed 15 stitches. Her attacker fled in a dark blue Dodge Caravan. Melissa proved to be what the lead detective called the best witness he had ever interviewed. She provided detailed descriptions of her attacker's appearance, his vehicle, and the sequence of events. She described a white male 18 to 20 years old, around 6 feet 2 inches and 210 pounds, with light blonde hair and very fair skin. He wore plaid shorts. One officer who regularly patrolled that park had seen a vehicle matching that description weeks earlier. Something about it had felt wrong, so he had run the plates. Nothing suspicious came up at the time, so he moved on. Now he knew his instinct had been correct. The vehicle was registered to a couple in their 40s. Neither matched Melissa's description, but their 19-year-old son did. His name was Daniel Bartelt. Police called him and asked him to come to the station. Daniel agreed immediately. He didn't ask what the interview was about. He didn't ask for any details. He simply said he would come in. And where was Daniel Bartelt when he received this call? He was at the Blodgett home attending a memorial gathering for Jessie. He was consoling her parents. He was crying with her friends. Daniel Bartelt and Jessie Blodgett had dated for several months in high school. They sat next to each other every day. Both were heavily involved in theater. Both played multiple instruments. They wrote music together. Just 2 months before Jessie's death, they had recorded a song together that she posted to her YouTube channel. Daniel had ended the relationship, but they remained friends. When he dropped out of college and returned home, Jessie was concerned. Daniel had been a straight-A student, always enthusiastic about his education. His sudden departure from college didn't make sense to her. But as they spent more time together again in the same friend group, something shifted. Everyone knew Daniel wanted to rekindle the romantic relationship. Jessie was happy staying friends. She wasn't interested in dating him again. When Daniel arrived at the police station to discuss Melissa's attack, investigators had no idea yet about his connection to Jessie's case. They were simply following up on the park assault. The interview did not go well for Daniel. He was quiet for long periods. He couldn't remember specifics about the day Melissa was attacked, even though it had been recently. When asked about injuries on his hands and arms, he claimed they came from work. But he had already been terminated from his job weeks earlier. Police gave him another chance to tell the truth. Finally, he admitted attacking Melissa. His stated motivation was bizarre. He said he wanted to scare someone because everyone else seemed so confident and he didn't understand it. He wanted someone to be like him. Detective Joel Clausing would later describe Daniel as clearly intelligent and self-aware, but someone who made his skin crawl. Daniel was arrested for the attack on Melissa. But the interview continued. And this is where everything changed. Detectives asked Daniel where he had been that day. He told them he had been at the Blodgett house for Jessie's memorial. The detectives did a double take. They expressed sympathy and asked if he had been close to Jessie. Daniel hung his head and said he couldn't believe someone had raped and murdered her. The detectives froze. At that point, the autopsy was still being completed. No information about sexual assault had been released. Only the killer would know that detail. Daniel Bartelt had just told investigators something only the perpetrator could say. Now, when Daniel had left the Blodgett home to go to the police station, he was confident he would return quickly. He told his friends they could pick him up in 30 minutes. Joy Blodgett had even reassured him, saying police would want to talk to all of Jessie's friends as part of the routine investigation. But when his friends arrived to get him, Officers were waiting outside. "We can't release him," they said. "He's being detained." No one could believe it. There had to be some mistake. But there was no mistake. Daniel became the primary suspect in both cases. During a new interview focused on Jessie's murder, Daniel claimed he had been in her home in the weeks before she died, but had kept it quiet. He said Jessie had tried to be romantic with him, but he didn't want to admit this because he was in a new relationship. Investigators were skeptical. They asked about his whereabouts on the morning of July 15th. Daniel said he had been driving around pretending to go to work, then stopped at a park. Surveillance footage confirmed he was there. Police immediately went to that park. The garbage bins Daniel had been seen near were still full. Officers pulled everything out and found critical evidence. Inside a cereal box were ropes, bloody tissues, and tape that matched the tape used to bind Jessie. A search of Daniel's home turned up more rope and tape. DNA analysis would later confirm both Daniel and Jessie's DNA on these materials. Daniel's DNA was also found under Jessie's fingernails. Forensic evidence confirmed sexual assault had occurred. But perhaps most disturbing was what investigators found on Daniel's laptop. His search history included serial killers by number of victims, spree killers, snuff films, and strangulation cases. One video showed a woman being raped, strangled, washed, and positioned in bed. This matched exactly what had been done to Jessie. Detective Clausing said there was no way to describe how vile and brutal some of these videos were. Investigators also found portions of what appeared to be a novel titled Red is Red by Joseph Bartelt. Joseph was Daniel's middle name. Parts of the novel focused on characters named Jessica and Dee, with Dee beating someone into a coma using a pillowcase filled with Lego bricks. The evidence was overwhelming. Daniel was charged with first-degree intentional homicide in Jessie's death, plus 3 felony counts related to Melissa's attack. Based on forensic analysis and the physical evidence, investigators reconstructed what happened on the morning of July 15, 2013. Daniel entered the Blodgett home around 9 a.m., after both parents had left for work. He knew their schedule. He knew the layout of the house. He knew Jessie would be home alone and sleeping. He brought everything with him. Rope. Tape. What prosecutors would later call a murder kit. These items had been planned and gathered in advance. Once inside Jessie's room, he bound her wrists and ankles. He wrapped tape around her face to secure a gag. Then he sexually assaulted and strangled her with rope. After she was dead, he washed her body and her hair. He cleaned up the scene as much as possible. He positioned her back in bed as though she were sleeping peacefully, even arranging the blanket neatly around her. Then he left. He drove to a nearby park and disposed of the evidence in garbage bins. He returned home. Later that same day, he went to the Blodgett home and mourned alongside Jessie's family and friends. He hugged her parents. He shared memories. He cried. Jessie's father Buck would later recall an incident from about a week before the murder. Daniel and Jessie had been at the Blodgett home alone, playing music. When Joy came home, Daniel had turned to Jessie and said something that struck Joy as odd at the time. "What's your mom doing back so early?" Looking back, Buck and Joy believe this may have been an earlier attempt that was interrupted. Daniel Bartelt pleaded not guilty and the case went to trial. Despite the overwhelming evidence, everyone had to endure the painful process of a full court proceeding. Joy Blodgett was the first witness to take the stand. She described finding her daughter's body. She described the 911 call. She described the scene in Jessie's bedroom. Police video of the crime scene was shown in court. The Blodgett family held each other as prosecutors displayed it. The video included images of Jessie's body and the ligature marks on her neck. Investigators testified about the evidence found at the park. They described the contents of Daniel's laptop, including the video that mirrored Jessie's murder. They explained that on the day Jessie died, Daniel appeared to have deleted the song he and Jessie had recorded together. The file was recovered from unallocated clusters on his hard drive. The defense argued the evidence was circumstantial. They suggested contamination was possible. They claimed the state hadn't proven its case. But they offered no alternative explanation for how Daniel's DNA ended up under Jessie's fingernails, on the tape that bound her, or on the rope used to strangle her. The jury deliberated for just 3 hours. They found Daniel Bartelt guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. For Jessie's murder, he received life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the attack on Melissa, he received 5 years in prison plus 5 years of supervision. Many criticized this second sentence as far too lenient for what was clearly a violent predatory assault. Before you continue, if this type of detailed investigative analysis interests you, please consider subscribing to Silent Evidence. We focus on cases where the evidence speaks volumes. At his sentencing, Daniel Bartelt made a lengthy statement that many found disturbing. He remained calm throughout. He addressed Buck and Joy Blodgett directly. He claimed he couldn't give them the answers they were looking for. He said he counted the days and hours just like they did. He insisted the jumpsuit and shackles didn't make him guilty. He acknowledged there was evidence he couldn't refute, but stopped short of admitting responsibility. He claimed he would have accepted an Hartford plea, which would have allowed him to acknowledge the evidence without admitting guilt, but was told this wasn't an option. He said he pitted the judge for having the power to condemn another human being. He claimed he couldn't prove his innocence to anyone, not even himself. Then he told Buck and Joy he prayed for them, that he had seen beauty from their family even on the day after Jessie died when he was with them. He ended by saying he believed someday he would be before a court that would know his conscience was grieved. He said he loved them and was sorry for their loss. Many observers noted what he didn't say. He never admitted what he did. He never took responsibility. He never explained why. Buck Blodgett responded with extraordinary grace. He told Daniel he forgave him as he had every day since learning Daniel was responsible. But he added that Daniel would not know true forgiveness until he told the truth. He said Daniel had lived a lie for 457 days and still had a chance to own what he did. Buck ended with words many found powerful. He told Daniel he forgave him and loved him even while hating what he had done. He said forgiveness and love were not incompatible with acknowledging the horror of the crime. Daniel Bartelt appealed his conviction to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. He argued that police had used statements he made without a lawyer present, claiming this violated his constitutional rights. The Wisconsin Supreme Court rejected his appeal. The conviction stood. Daniel Bartelt remains in prison, serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The legal proceedings revealed several factors that made this case particularly strong from a prosecution standpoint. First, the DNA evidence was overwhelming and came from multiple sources. Second, the digital evidence from his laptop established both motive and methodology. Third, his own statement revealing knowledge only the perpetrator would have essentially eliminated any defense strategy. From an employment and opportunity perspective, Daniel's deception about having a job created the exact circumstances necessary to commit this crime. He had unstructured time during hours when most people his age would be accounted for. He had no co-workers to provide alibis. He had freedom of movement without anyone questioning his whereabouts. This case also demonstrates the importance of parallel investigations. If Melissa had not fought off her attacker and provided such detailed descriptions, if that patrol officer hadn't followed his instinct about the suspicious van, if those investigators hadn't connected the cases, Daniel might never have been identified as a suspect. 1 month after Jessie's murder, 500 people gathered for a vigil in Hartford. It was at this event that Buck and Joy Blodgett announced the creation of the Love is Greater Than Hate project. The nonprofit organization's mission is to end violence against girls and women. This cause was particularly meaningful because Jessie herself had been passionate about this issue in the months before her death. She had campaigned actively against male violence toward women. She had spoken out about it repeatedly. Buck Blodgett would later say that Jessie had tried to tell him about this issue, that she was fiercely outspoken about it for a year or two before her death. He admitted he listened but didn't fully understand until it happened to her. The organization's mission statement reads, "Ending interpersonal violence, promoting forgiveness, practicing love." Buck and Joy travel to schools, colleges, and prisons to share their story. They don't frame themselves as a service organization but as a message organization. The message is simple: end interpersonal violence through love and forgiveness. Buck has stated that when he's not actively working on this mission, he's in pain. But when he's doing something purposeful, talking about love and forgiveness, he finds peace. The project asks people to take a pledge against male-on-female violence. Community members rallied around the cause immediately. T-shirts with the organization's message began appearing throughout Hartford and beyond. The hope is that with each shirt sold, each pledge taken, each story shared, the message spreads further. Hartford, Wisconsin is a small community where everyone knows everyone. This familiarity created both advantages and challenges for the investigation. On one hand, Daniel Bartelt's presence at the memorial gathering didn't raise immediate suspicion because he was known to everyone as Jessie's friend and former boyfriend. His emotional display seemed appropriate given the circumstances. No one questioned why he was there or what he was doing. On the other hand, once he became a suspect, the community connections meant witnesses could provide detailed information about relationships, schedules, and patterns of behavior. People could verify or contradict his claims because they had seen him regularly. The investigation also revealed systemic issues around reporting and resources. Melissa's attack in the park could have been prevented if there had been better follow-up on the patrol officer's initial instinct about the suspicious van. The fact that nothing came up when he ran the plates meant he moved on, but his gut feeling was correct. The case demonstrates how employment verification serves as both an alibi tool and a deception detector. When Daniel claimed his injuries came from work, a simple check of employment records revealed the lie. When he said he had been at work during certain times, payroll documentation would have proven otherwise. His unemployment created opportunity, but his lies about it created evidence. From a community safety perspective, the police statement that there was no ongoing threat proved accurate. This was a targeted crime by someone known to the victim, not a random act by a stranger. But that distinction was likely little comfort to Hartford residents who had believed their town was safe. At Daniel's sentencing, Buck Blodgett was given 10 minutes to speak. He began by noting the impossibility of summing up a life in such a short time. He said he should be able to shout out to the world daily until life left his body about who Jessie was, what she stood for, and how deeply she touched people. Jessie had taught nearly 30 students in just a couple of months. She volunteered every summer with the Central Middle School Orchestra. She performed in musicals while maintaining a theater scholarship at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She campaigned for sustainable living, environmental issues, and violence against women. She was academically gifted from an early age. In first grade, her teacher created a custom curriculum because Jessie was miles ahead of her classmates. When other students were spelling simple words, Jessie was spelling metamorphosis. Her dream was to become a choir director. She believed music could change the world. Buck described what he lost in specific, devastating terms. He would never again end a long, stressful workday with a walk around the block with his daughter, talking freely about everything. In her final month, Jessie had developed a habit of starting every walk by asking, "So, how was your day, Dad?" He told the court that pain would remain in the background and often the foreground of his life every second. It would never go away. Others told him he would adapt, learn to function with it, which he already had. But it would remain there forever. In the weeks following Jessie's death, the Blodgett family received over 1,000 cards and letters. The outpouring demonstrated the breadth of Jessie's impact on her community. The murder of Jessie Blodgett represents an intersection of several factors that made the crime possible and the investigation successful. Daniel Bartelt's employment deception created unstructured time and eliminated workplace alibis. His familiarity with the Blodgett family gave him knowledge of schedules and access to the home. His relationship with Jessie meant his presence at the memorial gathering seemed appropriate rather than suspicious. But these same factors that enabled the crime also built the case against him. His lies about employment were easily disproven. His knowledge of details only the killer would know gave him away. His disposal of evidence in a public park where surveillance cameras operated created a documented chain of events. The parallel investigation of Melissa's attack proved critical. Without her detailed description and the patrol officer's memory of the suspicious van, Daniel might never have been called in for questioning. And without that initial interview about a different crime, he might never have revealed his knowledge about Jessie's sexual assault. The case demonstrates the importance of documentation in modern investigations. Employment records, cell phone data, surveillance footage, digital searches, DNA analysis. Each piece individually might be explained away, but collectively they build an overwhelming picture. Perhaps most notably, the Blodgett family's response transformed their tragedy into a mission. The Love is Greater Than Hate project carries forward Jessie's own advocacy work on violence against women. Buck enjoys commitment to forgiveness while demanding truth offers a model that many find both challenging and inspiring. Jessie Blodgett was 19 years old. She had plans to become a choir director. She taught music to children. She performed in musicals. She advocated for causes she believed in. She wrote in her diary about confronting problems without fear. She should have had the chance to live that life. The fact that someone she knew and trusted took that chance away doesn't just represent one crime. It represents the loss of everything she would have created, taught, performed, and inspired in the decades she should have had. And if this kind of detailed examination of evidence and institutional factors in criminal cases interests you, please subscribe to Silent Evidence. Thank you for watching.